Hello and welcome to my presentation on the workers' compensation fraud. This is a summary of the case. In this case, the defendants created a hotline so the patients thought to help navigate through the workers' compensation system. But instead of receiving a hotline when these injured workers called, it was really a patient recruitment entity. And these entities sold the business of these injured workers to corrupt lawyers and doctors whose goal was to bill as much as possible. In exchange for this, the patient brokers would receive cash and kickbacks. And as an illustration of how much they were billing, one provider billed almost $6,000 for a single heat or cold pack. They subjected patients to unnecessary medical treatments. For example, if you had a knee injury, they might suggest multiple things, multiple MRIs for different body parts, a sleep study, just DNA tests, and so much more that was unnecessary. And one of these patient recruitment entities was called Central Legal, and they had billboards, flyers, advertising, business cards. It was widely advertised. And when a worker would call, the scheduling company would take over and basically decide how they could maximize the profit from this injured worker. So the key parties involved, Fermin Iglesias and Carlos Aguilera, they were the main defendants in the case. They were the ones who set up the patient recruiting and scheduling companies in Central America and Mexico. And they colluded with the doctors, lawyers, and patient brokers who recommended the doctors and lawyers in order to pull all this off. The main victims in this case were the injured workers. They were usually seasonal migrant workers who traveled between California and Mexico. They often worked in agriculture and other fields where they could get injured more often. And the workers' compensation system and private insurance, together, these two victims were cheated out of over $200 million. So some of the prevalent fraud risk factors were there's definitely a lack of workers' compensation claims oversight. No one recognized that $6,000 for a single ice or cold pack was outrageous, or that a lot of these tests were unnecessary. There was obviously collusion between the doctors, the attorneys, and the lawyers, and the scheduling agency, the patient brokers, and the opportunity was there to commit this fraud because of the collusion. And there are definitely pressure and incentives. Of course, there was the incentive for the patient brokers to receive the cash and kickbacks. And of course, there was the incentives for the doctors to and lawyers to receive new patients. But there's also pressure because Fermin and Carlos required doctors to meet quotas for medical services and uh, goods on average for each patient. And if they didn't meet those quotas, they threatened these doctors that they would stop sending patients their way. So these are the kind of primary lessons learned from the case. Shortly after this case and similar ones, California state passed a law that required states workers' comp to suspend bills submitted by medical providers who were charged with fraud and abuse, and that was enforced in 2017. This case further highlights the importance of oversight, especially in cases where fraud is more likely to happen, such as insurance and workers' comp. And the importance of ethical practices, especially in the medical field and in law, where we expect these professions to protect the public, there needs to be a higher importance of ethical practices and also an importance of penalties and enforcement of penalties to ensure that these professions are acting ethically. That was my overview. Thank you.